Folks should be able to see my screen. We're going to give folks just one more minute. We are going to get started right at 10 because the 3 THN staff on this call have another call at 11. So we're gonna try to get this going pretty promptly. So thank you so much for joining us and being here right at 10. All right, well, my clock says 10 a.m., so we're going to go ahead and get started. If you are here to talk about the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development's Continuum of Care program, you are in the right place. We are going to be talking about the local application process and the balance of state continuum of care. So I'm going to go ahead and start moving us along into the slides. We'll start with introductions. My name is Jim Ward. I'm the Director of Planning here at Texas Homeless Network. I would say the vast majority of my time is spent working with communities in the Texas balance of state. Hope, would you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi there. I'm Hope Rogers. I'm the CoC Performance Manager for the Texas Balance of State Continuum of Care. So I support CoC funded grantees throughout our region.
And I'm Axton Nichols. I'm the CoC Performance Coordinator and work also supporting CoC programs.
Great. So we're going to be the THN staff kind of guiding you through today's content. I'll just forewarn you, it's a lot of content. If you've participated in this process before, there's no way to make it, quote unquote easy. But we have done the best we can to try to make it digestible for persons that have not been paying or have not been a part of this process before. So I'm going to take us just kind of a quick overview of the agenda. We're going to talk very briefly about what the CoC program is, what it does, why we're talking to you about this local application process. Then we're going to talk at length about the local application process itself, how to submit an application, what we're asking of you, what we're scoring on, the timeline for all this. We're going to talk some about the request for proposals. And then, of course, we hope to save time for questions and then bring you along for next steps. And so with that, I will pass it to Hope to get us started.
I think I'll go ahead and do it here. Yeah, so just kind of real brief overview of what the CoC is. So the Texas Balance of State CoC covers 215, Texas's 254 counties. So we cover basically 85% of Texas's landmass. The Texas Homeless Network is what's called the collaborative applicant for this CoC. THN is also the HMIS lead agency for the balance of state. So the collaborative applicant means we're charged with kind of carrying out this funding competition. And the lead agency means our agency also operates the HMIS system that projects use. So what is a CoC? A CoC is defined by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development in the interim role as the group organized to carry out the responsibilities required under the CoC program for a defined geographic area. So a CoC is a community-based planning network for homeless assistance. A CoC can also be thought of as the geographic area covered by this planning network. And the CoC is also the name of the program operated by HUD, where these funds come from. So CoC, when you hear that, can mean several different things, but it's all referring to this CoC program. So this is a map of Texas showing the different CoCs operated within Texas. So everything you see in orange is part of our balance of state continuum of care. So as you can see, we cover the majority of the state, and basically everywhere that's not one of the major urban centers or some of those surrounding areas. All right, so HUD CoC program, what's the kind of purpose of the program is to promote a community-wide commitment to the goal of ending homelessness. So again, the CoC program is meant to, again, encourage that cooperation across communities to make sure programs are working together on this goal to end homelessness. CoC programs are meant to provide funding for efforts to quickly rehouse people experiencing homelessness while minimizing the trauma and dislocation caused by homelessness. So again, all projects working within the CoC should have as their primary goal to quickly end homelessness for individuals experiencing it. CoC has also worked to promote access to and effective utilization of mainstream programs by people experiencing homelessness. So the CoC program comes with its own funding that we can assist folks with, but we also, CoC programs should also be working to connect folks to those programs that already exist, whether that's through housing authorities or other mainstream benefits. CoC should also work to optimize self-sufficiency among the people experiencing homelessness. So most of the people experiencing or receiving assistance through a CoC program will eventually kind of exit at some point and be supporting themselves. So programs should be working to ensure that those folks are able to and in a good position to exit and support themselves at some point.
All right, so before we dive into the details of the NOFO and the competition, I think it's important to take a step back and talk about the big picture. So the structure of the CoC program requires eligible entities to apply for CoC program funding through their local CoC, which requires THN as the CoC lead to develop and run a competitive process for these funds in alignment with both the requirements of HUD and the requirements and the priorities of the CoC. And then THN as the CoC lead agency makes funding recommendations to HUD through what's called the priority listing. And then HUD awards funds to selected projects and then contracts directly with those recipients, where recipients operate projects and document client outcomes in either HMIS or the comparable HMIS database, and report performance outcomes to both HUD and the CoC. And THN as the CoC lead provides ongoing technical assistance and support to recipients, in addition to ongoing monitoring and oversight of funded projects. And each project contributes to the overall system performance of the CoC, and CoCs use these outcomes to determine priorities for the CoC. So HUD released the FY2023 NOFO, or Notice of Funding Opportunity, for Continuum of Care program funds on July 5th of this year. And so this NOFO spells out exactly what can and cannot be funded under this opportunity. And then we, as the CoC lead agency, develop a request for proposals, or RFP, that aligns with this NOFO. So for the balance of state, this NOFO makes available about $13.4 million for current recipients seeking to renew currently funded projects. In addition to renewal projects, there is about $3.8 million available for new projects under the CoC bonus, and about $5 million available for new projects under the domestic violence bonus. And we'll be going into more detail about what each of those means a little bit later. So starting in this year's competition, all applicants will have to demonstrate alignment with the funding priorities of the CoC. These priorities were developed last year in collaboration with stakeholders throughout our region, and include priorities like having a community-wide commitment for the proposed project. So we want applicants to be consulting with local partners and gaining buy-in from local partners and stakeholders in their community. And we want to know who you consulted with locally when developing your project. We also want to see applicants bringing other housing or healthcare resources from their local community and leveraging those resources in the design of their project. We also want projects to have a strong landlord engagement strategy, because I'm sure, as many of you know, increasing the amount of rental assistance in your community will only get you so far without having landlords willing to accept that rental assistance. So we really want projects to have well-defined landlord engagement strategies. In addition, Access to mainstream benefits has been a longstanding priority of both HUD and the CoC. So we also want to see participants in these programs have access to either SOAR trained staff, which is a certification that allows folks to easily apply for SSI or SSDI, or some other kind of equivalent local benefits specialist available to participants in this project. In addition, Housing First, which is a low barrier approach to programming, has been a longstanding priority of both HUD and the CoC, and is actually a required approach in the CoC program. So we want to see all projects use a Housing First approach, in addition to targeting resources to the hardest to serve populations, and also targeting underserved communities, which can vary by the community that you're in. And then lastly, including people with lived experience in the design and implementation and ongoing oversight of your project. So this is a visual of the competitive application process for the balance of state. So starting on the left in the green, HUD releases the NOFO, which they did on July 5th, which prompts us at THN to develop the request for proposals. In addition to all application and evaluation materials that align with the NOFO, which then go to our CoC board for review and approval. Next in the yellow, which is where we are today, THN posts these materials to our website and shares them publicly and provides trainings and technical assistance to applicants. And then in the third stage in the purple, once applicants submit all of their materials, those are reviewed and scored by the IRT or independent review team, which is a group of stakeholders throughout the balance of state that are tasked with reviewing and scoring applications based on some predefined evaluation criteria specific to each application type. And then THN ranks those projects in order of their score that they received, either through the independent review team or scored internally for renewal projects. And then lastly, the CoC board approves the CoC application, which is the application that THN responds to, and is basically where everything gets packaged up on behalf of the CoC, and THN submits the collaborative application to HUD. And all of this occurs in 90 days from start to finish. So for the balance of state in FY2023, there is one request for proposals and 4 distinct application pathways, all of which are available, all of the applications are available on a platform called SurveyMonkey Apply, or sometimes just called Apply. And the RFP is available on our website. Before we get too much further into this, I do want to point out it is the responsibility of the applicant to make sure you are applying under the correct application. So would highly encourage you to consult the RFP before getting started on this process. So a little bit about the types of applications that are available. The renewal application is limited to currently funded CoC program recipients who are seeking to renew existing funds. Even if your project was awarded last year and your project still hasn't started yet, all currently funded renewal projects who are wanting to keep those funds must submit a renewal project application, regardless of whether your project has started or not. Expansion applications are limited to current recipients who are wanting to expand the activities of an existing project. And for this purpose, expansion applications are considered a new project application. The CoC bonus is where any applicant can request a new project for either permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, joint transitional housing and rapid rehousing, or supportive services only / coordinated entry. And the DB bonus is intended to create new projects that will exclusively serve survivors and victims of domestic violence in either rapid rehousing or joint transitional housing and rapid rehousing projects. And as of FY2022, so in last year's competition, DV bonus applicants are limited to exclusively victim service providers or organizations who have a primary mission of serving victims and survivors. And with that, I will hand it back to Jim.
Thanks, Hope. So yeah, we wanted to talk a little bit about what we call the threshold requirements, and these are requirements that apply to all project applicants. So there's two types of threshold requirements. There's HUD's threshold requirements and the CoC's threshold requirements. So this bulleted list here is not an exhaustive list. There is a comprehensive list in the RFP section 1D. But we wanted to bring forward some that we thought were most important to someone who may be kind of on the periphery of the continuum of care or a first-time applicant. So applicants may submit one new project application in addition to any eligible renewal project application. So that is regardless of your organization's history with the continuum of care, you're limited to one new project application. And the reason for that is because these projects are quite administratively burdensome, and they are a lot to stand up at one time. And so we want to make sure that we're setting folks up for success. And if you submit multiple applications thinking that one might get selected, there is a strong possibility that multiple will get selected, and then you are kind of stuck with some work that you can't actually accomplish. So again, for this purpose, expansions are considered a new project application. Additionally, proposed projects may only serve counties within the Texas Balance of State continuum of care. So if you're a community that borders on another continuum of care, there's a number of those communities, places like Hays County, Round Rock, or Williamson County, the areas outside of Houston especially, you must propose to serve exclusively counties within the Texas Balance of State with these funds. All proposed activities for the project must be eligible. I think that kind of seems like it might be pretty straightforward, but this is not the place to get super creative. HUD will fund really specific activities, and those activities are what we're looking for. New project applicants must not have open monitoring findings with HUD as of the date of the local application submission deadline. That applies to renewal and new project applicants alike. Again, Hope mentioned previously that as of FY22, all new project applicants that are applying under the DV bonus must be victim service providers or participating in a comparable database or have a primary mission that is to serve survivors. We're also going to be looking for proof of matching funds. Applicants must satisfy to the CoC's satisfaction that you will be able to meet the 25% matching requirement. And then I kind of glossed over that first bullet point. HUD has a number of other threshold requirements that we do not, we link to them in the RFP, but we don't go over them explicitly, including things like mandatory disclosure requirements and fair housing compliance. Now, additionally, project applicants must agree to the expectations outlined in our 2023 CoC expectations form, which is linked in the RFP. You must, of course, be an eligible applicant, which includes a nonprofit organization, a state or local government, or instrumentalities of state or local governments, such as a local mental health authority. In addition, public housing authorities are eligible without a limitation, so you don't have to be administering HUD-VASH or the Housing Choice Voucher Program. If you're a PHA, you're eligible without restriction. You must, of course, have an active system for award management registration account and have an active unique entity identifier, or a UEIN, formerly Duns and Bradstreet number. You can have no outstanding delinquent federal debt to the federal government as listed at sam.gov. You must have a financial management system that meets federal standards at 2 CFR 200. You must submit a code of conduct or have a code of conduct on file with the federal government. And you must submit a completed certification regarding lobbying and disclosure of lobbying activities, as well as additional requirements identified in the FY2023 request for proposals. Again, I realize that this sounds like a laundry list, and it absolutely is a laundry list of things. Highly encourage new project applicants to visit the RFP before getting too deep into the application process and realizing that you will not be able to satisfy one or more threshold requirements. We did want to talk a little bit about project application requirements. So these are things that apply not necessarily to the applicant, but are more project specific. So specifically, new project application budgets must be between $200,000 at the minimum and no more than $750,000, excluding match requirements. The CoC will not accept project applications that include the following, which is construction, acquisition, or rehabilitation, regardless of the language used to request those activities. The CoC and HUD will not fund standalone transitional housing. It is not an eligible project type. Additionally, any funding request or project design that conflicts with the statutory limitations on use of funds. So you cannot, for example, combine operating assistance and rental assistance in the same unit. That's really more kind of project specific, but highly encourage applicants to review the linked section of the CoC program interim rule to ensure that what you're proposing is allowable by HUD. Additionally, we kind of talked about this before, but applications must align with the CoC's funding priorities. The maximum request for HMIS or comparable database activities must be no more than 3% of the total of all other budget line item requests and cannot exceed $15,000 per application, whichever is less. The budget for the project itself, so the total budget when you factor in your admin, supportive services, rental assistance, et cetera, can be no more than 50% of the most recently approved agency operating budget. And then finally, housing stability case management is required activity for all project applications. So all housing projects must request supportive services as a budget line item in the application. That's again, because we want folks to be set up for success, not only the participants, but you as the administrator of these funds and attempting to house this population without sufficient supportive services is just setting you up for failure. Again, these are not exhaustive. There are additional application requirements in the RFP, but those are the ones that we wanted to highlight in this space. And with that, I will pass it on.
All right, thanks, Jim. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the mechanics of applying. First of all, we're going to talk about the application software we use, which is called SurveyMonkey Apply, or often just referred to as Apply. So the Texas Balanced Estate local application process will be hosted entirely within the Apply platform. However, applicants will also be completing some tasks outside of Apply, and then they will upload that information to Apply. So some of the information that you would be uploading to Apply would include your eSNAPS applicant profile, eSNAPS project application, and any additional required uploads such as letters of support or match documentation or other things like that. For questions related to your Apply account, such as resetting your password or retrieving your username, please contact Apply directly. THN cannot reset your passwords or retrieve usernames. We do not have that kind of access to this system. Applicants are highly encouraged to add this email address to their list of approved emails. You will be receiving automated messages from Apply as you work through this process. And it's possible these messages would be caught by a spam filter. So you really need to make sure that this email address, noReply@mail.smapply.net, make sure that is greenlit on your email so it doesn't get caught in your spam filter. THN cannot be held responsible for miscommunications because an email went to spam or other reasons. All right, so the other system you'll be working in for this application is eSNAPS. So eSNAPS is the electronic CoC program application and grant management system utilized by HUD. Applicants will be completing two primary activities in eSNAPS and uploading those to Apply. The first one of those is the eSNAPS applicant profile. So applicants will complete that in eSNAPS and then download that, export and download that, and submit that. Submit the organization's most recently submitted applicant profile to Apply. THN is unable to offer significant technical assistance with this component. If you're having issues with that, we encourage you to look at the eSNAP guidance available through HUD Exchange. The other bit projects will be doing in eSNAPs is the actual eSNAPs project application. So applicants must export and upload a completed eSNAPs project application that correlates to the project you are submitting and apply. This means applications must submit the eSNAP application prior to submitting the apply submission. So that's a key point here, is that you will have to finish that project application in eSNAPs before you can finish what we have in apply. Applicants must use HUD's detailed instructions to successfully complete the project application in eSNAPs. THN can only offer limited technical assistance regarding navigation in eSNAPs. However, questions from applicants regarding eSNAPs are generally referred back to the detailed instructions. So I believe we are still waiting for the detailed instructions to be posted this year, but those will be available on HUD's website, and we will probably link to it on our website as well.
Actually, just real quick, they actually came out late on Friday, so those are available to applicants at this point.
Well, there you go. So similar to the RFP, it's really important to review those detailed instructions to make sure you're filling out those components correctly. So those are the kind of two systems you'll be working in to submit applications. So now talking a little bit about the types of applications you can submit. So the first type we accept are renewal project applications. So these are for projects that were previously awarded funding in last year's 2022 CoC program competition. Renewal projects will be scored based on performance data from that project, as well as some answers to supplemental project narrative questions. Renewal projects, except for first-time renewals, can import their most recent renewal submission, but you will likely need to review this information for accuracy, make sure if anything has changed, that is updated. First-time renewals are held harmless. So if a project was funded last year, they likely do not have a full year's worth of data that we use to evaluate them, so they are held harmless in this competition, although they still need to submit application materials. Renewal project applications must remain materially similar to prior awards. That means there can't be any substantial changes to the subpopulation served, or adding or removing budget line items, or reducing the number of units being served. None of that is allowed through this renewal process. That would have to be done separately through a grant amendment later on. All right, next type of project applications we are accepting are for expansion projects. So expansion projects must increase the number of units or persons served and or services being provided to the existing program participants. Expansions can be funded through the CoC bonus or DV bonus or reallocated funds. Projects may not replace state or local funds with CoC program funds. Expansion applications will only be considered for projects that are eligible to have their existing CoC project renewed. So again, expansions are only for existing projects that want to expand the number of people they're serving or the size of their project, things like that. Renewal projects must have closed at least one annual performance report or APR. So again, you have to have been in operation for over a year before you can apply for an expansion. Projects originally awarded under the DV bonus are eligible for expansion and may apply for that expansion with either CoC bonus or DV bonus funding. And expansion projects will be evaluated primarily based on the performance of the renewal project that's attached to that expansion.
I think this one is me, y'all. So talking about CoC bonus project applications. So there are two primary interventions, but we're going to talk about all of them. So those are permanent supportive housing. So that is a long-term rental assistance intervention that is tied to supportive services. These projects must serve either the chronically homeless exclusively, or what HUD calls dedicated plus. So we're not going to go too much into what dedicated plus is in this setting, but essentially it is folks that are chronically homeless or meet some other criteria that is relatively nuanced. And so if applicants are considering Dedicated Plus, they're encouraged to reach out to us directly, but certainly review the NOFO and the detailed instructions. In addition, we're looking for project applications for what we call rapid rehousing, or what HUD calls rapid rehousing. So that is a time-limited intervention that consists of rental assistance that can last for up to 24 months and is accompanied by supportive services to promote housing stability. So these projects are typically targeted to the widest kind of population in a community, but they can be specific, including projects that target unaccompanied youth or survivors of domestic violence. Additionally, joint transitional housing and rapid rehousing. This is a really nuanced project type. So it's not one or the other, it is both. So it's a combination of transitional housing and rapid rehousing, where HUD and the COC's priority would be to move people as quickly as possible from non-permanent housing placements to permanent. So that is, the transitional housing should support the rapid rehousing, and applicants to this project type must make both available to their participants on an on-demand basis. So you cannot require someone to go through transitional housing first before they are able to access rapid rehousing. You have to have that kind of discussion on the front end with your participants and center client choice in the path of their participation. Additionally, we are soliciting applications for supportive services only for coordinated entry. So supportive services only coordinated entry is intended to help a community or a COC expand and enrich the coordinated entry processes in that community or COC. In the balance of state, we are prioritizing SSO CE projects that cover the entire geographic service area. Some important notes for applicants: you cannot mix interventions, right? So if you're thinking about a project application, you need to pick one of those bulleted items above. So permanent housing, permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, joint THRRH, or the SSO CE project. You cannot do a little bit of PSH and a little bit of rapid. You have to kind of double down on one of those interventions. All applications are limited to single-year grant terms. So that means that you will be requesting funding on an annual basis. And so that's kind of where we're at with that. DV bonus funding, which I'm going to get to here on the next slide, is very similar in the sense, except for the only project application types that are allowable are rapid rehousing and joint THRRH. HUD and the COC is really digging into the experience and capacity of DV providers to be able to operate these types of projects. So they really want to know, like, what was your experience with serving survivors prior to this competition cycle or this funding cycle, and are really going to be weighting that evidence heavily in their evaluation of projects. Similarly, with the COC bonus, joint THRRH is an allowable activity. I think nationally, COCs and providers are finding that this project type really is kind of more centered on or more appropriate for survivors of domestic violence. It allows a project to quickly resolve the issue or the situation that may be life-threatening for the survivor. Quickly extract them from a dangerous or violent situation in transitional housing and then move to rapid. But it's, again, you can't design a project around a particular flow. You have to be able to meet participants where they're at. And then as a special consideration for the domestic violence bonus application, you not only do you have to target survivors of domestic violence, those are literally the only persons that may be served in those projects. So if you are in a community and you're administering DV bonus funding, and someone who's not experiencing or is not fleeing domestic violence presents to your agency, you cannot use these funds to house that household. And with that, I'll pass it back to Hope.
All right, so these next 3 slides outline the stages and components of the different applications. There is a ton of overlap between the different applications and what's required. So for the sake of time, I'm really only going to explain the key concepts once, unless of course there are any questions, but we will walk through all of the application stages together. So starting with new projects under the CoC and DB bonus, these applicants will both complete the same stages, starting with what's called threshold verification. So the threshold verification stage is where we verify that you are eligible to apply for these funds and administer a CoC program. So we collect things like SAM registration, proposed geography, the type of application you're applying for, and the proposed activities. And then applicants that can satisfy all threshold requirements will move on to the full application. And the full application starts with the agency capacity stage. So this section, agency capacity, looks at how long your agency has been in operation and some of the work that you're already doing. In addition to the data that you use to develop the project application, what support exists from your local homeless coalition or other partners in your community. And then applicants who are applying under the DB bonus will see some additional questions in this stage about their history of providing services to survivors and victims. So the financial management and administration task is where applicants will provide information on how their organization has implemented or will implement the required internal controls at 2 CFR 200, in addition to some information about how your agency, what activities your agency utilizes to monitor financial and administrative activities within your organization. This section also requires you to upload a written statement on agency letterhead stating that you have an accounting system that is in compliance with 2 CFR 200. And it's also where you will upload your match documentation that you are proposing to use in this project. Next, applicants will complete a budget table to support the proposed activities and the requested funding. Before moving on to the component specific questions, which are specific to each component type. So PSH applicants may see a different set of questions than rapid rehousing applicants, and so on. So in this section, that is where you'll answer a series of questions specific to the component type you're applying for. So the types of questions here include things like how you'll engage participants and what types of supports you'll offer to them. And this section is also where you will be required to demonstrate alignment with the CoC's funding priorities, and will also require you to respond to the anticipated system performance measure outcomes of the proposed project based on your previous experience. And then all applicants will complete a monitoring history report. So this is where you tell us your history of state or federal awards in the last 5 years, your compliance with single financial audit requirements, whether or not you've had any funds recaptured and why, and whether or not your agency has been monitored by a state or federal agency in the last 5 years and the outcomes of those monitorings. And then the final stage within the full application is where applicants will provide a series of uploads that were not collected elsewhere in the application, including the eSNAPS applicant profile and the eSNAPS project application, which Axton touched on earlier, in addition to the certification of consistency with the consolidated plan, which is a HUD required form, generally signed by an office in the local government of the application of the applicant, certifying that the proposed project aligns with the local consolidated plan. So once applicants submit all these materials in the full application, THN will review all components and all materials and will work with applicants to make any needed corrections in what's called the quality review stage. And then from there, all new application materials under the CoC and DV bonus are reviewed and scored by at least 2 members of the independent review team, who again are provided with some predefined evaluation and scoring criteria for each application type. And then from there, all projects are ranked based on score. And then lastly is the submission to HUD by both THN and local applicants. So moving on to renewal projects. So because renewal projects have previously been vetted through a new application process, we have made every effort to pare down the renewal process to the minimum required information we need to collect and assess and score projects on. So renewals will go through the threshold verification stage that I spoke to previously before advancing to the full application stage. But renewals will respond to a limited set of questions in this stage about the activities in the renewal project over the last 12 months. Things like how the agency advances race equity, how the agency involves persons with lived experience of homelessness in the project, how you are implementing the provisions of HUD's equal access rule, and how you reach underserved communities. So limited set of narrative and checkbox questions that are collected here. New this year, renewal projects will also have to indicate how their project aligns with or advances the priorities of the CoC, in addition to how your project connects participants to local workforce opportunities. Renewal projects will also complete the same monitoring history report I mentioned earlier, which asks the same questions across all applications, and will submit all required uploads, including letters of support, match documentation, the eSNAPS applicant profile, and the eSNAPS project application, in addition to the certification of consistency with the consolidated plan. And just like the other projects, THN reviews all materials for completeness and works with applicants to make any corrections before they go on to scoring. I think Axon mentioned this earlier, but renewal applicants are scored based on the project's performance data for the last 12 months. And this is done by THN completing a renewal project scorecard on behalf of all renewal project applicants specific to their project type. And again, only renewal applicants whose projects have been in operation for at least 12 months are scored. So if you're a new project who hasn't started yet or hasn't been operating for at least 12 months, your renewal project will be held harmless in this competition. For renewal projects that are scored, THN will upload a completed scorecard to apply, and applicants will have a short window to contest their score before it goes to ranking and submission. So last is the expansion application. So this process is almost identical to the renewal application. The only difference being that we collect some limited information about the activities of their proposed expansion application and how it'll enrich the current activities that are being offered. In addition to things like how many clients are currently being served under the renewal and how many new clients will be served under the expansion. And then budget details of both the expansion and the associated renewal project, and how the expansion aligns with the CoC's funding priorities. And then another difference between the expansion and the renewals is that expansions will have an opportunity to provide information on any local housing or healthcare partnerships or commitments that will be leveraged in the proposed project, expansion project. So expansions will provide all of the same uploads provided in the renewal application, but these uploads will be specific to the expansion project, not the renewal. So once expansion applicants complete parts 1 and 2 of the application process in SurveyMonkey Apply, THN will review materials for completeness and then complete an expansion scorecard for applicants and upload this to Apply. And expansion project applications are primarily scored on the outcomes of the associated renewal project that they are seeking to expand. And once scores are finalized, projects are ranked prior to submission to HUD. All right, we're almost there, y'all. A little bit more on review and scoring. So HUD expects that each CoC implements a thorough review and oversight process at the local level for all CoC applications submitted to HUD. And in fact, one of the things that HUD scores us on as a CoC is the review and evaluation process that we use to review applicants. So for the balance of state, this includes a threshold and quality review of all applicants and all applicant materials. This also includes scoring by the independent review team for all new projects using predefined evaluation tools and criteria. And again, renewal projects are scored using the applicable renewal scorecard, which is completed using the project's last 12 months of performance data outcomes. And expansions are scored using the applicable expansion project scorecard, which again is primarily made up of the outcomes of the associated renewal project scorecard. And then THN develops ranking scenarios based on the criteria in the NOFO, which are then provided to the CoC board for final approval and ranking selection. And all scored criteria can be found in Appendix B of the RFP. And Appendix C is where renewal and expansion projects can view a blank scorecard for their project type.
All right, thanks. So real quick, I'm going to go over the timeline for this competition. As with most things in this presentation, there's going to be more detail in the RFP, so please consult the RFP for a complete timeline. The first thing on this timeline is the board approves the request for proposals, so that already happened. That was last week. So today, the collaborative application or the competitive application process opens, and that the competitive applications will close on August 20th at 11:59 p.m. And then as the quality review process will start after that. So again, that's THN kind of checking to make sure everything is there that needs to be there and that like detailed instructions were followed for the eSNAP materials. That quality review is done by August 24th. At that point, the applications go to the independent review team. So they review, the IRT reviews applications from August 25th and wraps up on September 3rd. Next thing on the timeline is the CoC board approves a ranking scenario on September 12th. After that, there's a short period where the board will consider any grievances projects choose to file. Then we have on September 20th, the CoC board will consider the collaborative application. So again, that's kind of all the information that the CoC is responsible for putting together in our application, collaborative application. So they consider that on September 20th. As that gets approved, then THN will submit the collaborative application on behalf of the CoC, and then the HUD's funding competition closes on September 28th.
All right, so before we open it up to Q&A, I want to talk a little bit about next steps for any applicants, which include downloading and reviewing the FY2023 CoC program request for proposals, which is linked here, but is also live on our website currently. In addition, creating or accessing your Apply account, and then beginning or completing the threshold verification in Apply in alignment with the requirements outlined in the RFP. And then, of course, the eSNAP's applicant profile is a required upload. So either creating or updating the organization's applicant profile in eSNAPs to make sure you are good to go for the rest of the application process. And then lastly, any questions that come up throughout this process that aren't addressed in today's call can be directed to txboscoc@thn.org. And with that, I think we will open it up for questions. And folks can feel free to, I think folks can unmute, but you can also share a question in the chat.
Hey, this is Jenny Stafford.
Hey, Jenny.
Hey, you know me, I've got a whole bunch of questions.
Great.
First of all, if we do an expansion project, will it be a standalone contract or will it be added on to our current existing project?
Yeah, that's a great question. So expansion projects are you will of course have to submit a standalone application, but in HUD's selection process, if your expansion is selected, your renewal project is removed from the priority listing. So you'll have one contract. So
Okay.
whenever your 2022 project comes up for renewal, and if your expansion is awarded, then you would just start with a 2023 at that time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Okay. Can I keep going?
Yes, please go for it.
Okay. Will we specify if we're applying for the DV bonus, or will you just decide if which fund it should go into?
So if you're proposing to, that's a great question. And also something we neglected to mention is the FAQ. There is an FAQ on our website specific to the local application process, and it covers this type of a question, but other questions as well. So if you're proposing to serve exclusively survivors of domestic violence, we would recommend that you apply under the DV bonus. The CoC will, when the kind of everything gets down to the crunch, if there's an issue with how you've applied, we may ask you to change. It's basically like a setting in eSnaps, but we would recommend if you're proposing to serve exclusively survivors, that you apply under the DV bonus. You can, so I think just in your follow-up question might be, well, if my project was originally awarded under the CoC bonus, does that matter? It does not. So you can expand a CoC bonus project with DV bonus, and vice versa, actually.
Okay, my last question. Does the new allocation amount about equal to what our current existing renewal projects are? Is it more or less?
Can you say that again? I'm sorry.
With the new allocation for the balance estate from HUD, is it equal to about what the current renewal amount is?
Oh, I see. Yeah, you're talking about like the tiering.
Yeah.
Yeah, so no, unfortunately this year HUD set a pretty aggressive tier 1 requirement that is 93% of the annual renewal demand. So that 13.4 million will actually work out to be some, 93% of that in tier 1. But it should include all of that 13.4 million should include all projects eligible for renewal in the CoC program, with adjustments for FMR made after 2022.
Thanks.
Yeah, I see some more questions in the chat. I mean, so Kelly asks, can you remind me, if we have submitted a code of conduct before, do we need to do it again? We have not received an acknowledgement for it. Ooh, that's a really good question, Kelly. So in the RFP, there is a specific section about the code of conduct and a link for you to look through HUD's code of conduct library. They don't actually review your code of conduct and provide feedback on it. If it satisfies HUD's criteria, they will move it forward into their code of conduct library for all HUD recipients. So you should be able to search that library with your EIN. And if your organization is listed there, then you do not need to submit another code of conduct. If, however, your organization is not listed in HUD's library, then yes, you would need to submit another code of conduct. I'll tell you that for THN, we had to submit ours like 3 or 4 years in a row for whatever reason. And then finally, they just accepted it. So it wouldn't surprise me at all that even if you previously submitted a code, that you may need to resubmit this year. And that's something that you would attach to your applicant profile in eSnaps and then upload to apply. But yes, that's something that we are going to look for in our completeness and quality review. John Meyer said, if local housing authority receives stability vouchers, can you link those with the rapid rehousing application? And the answer to that question is yes, you can. You know, of course, you cannot house people in CoC funded rapid rehousing that are already permanently housed. So that would need to be incorporated into the project design, but that is something that is allowable in terms of leveraging local housing resources. John Akers said, thanks again for setting up today's training. I had some questions regarding resolving HUD issues and conditions and monitoring findings. John, we may need to follow up with you after this call on this one. Currently correcting match time. Are we required to wait the completion? No, not at all. You can and you should begin, if you are proposing to apply during this competition, begin working on the project application like after this call if you can. Now, the monitoring findings will prevent an applicant from submitting a new project application. It will not prevent an applicant from renewing an existing project application. So if you were monitored in FY 2022 or this year, this summer, and you have open monitoring findings, in order to apply for a new project, you have to resolve those open monitoring findings before August the 20th. But that should not stop you from submitting your renewal project application either in eSnaps or in Apply. We got a few more here. Looks like Axton posted the link to the Code of Conduct library. Robert says, if we need to make changes to a renewal project, at what point do we identify the changes to the grant? If you would send me an email at txboscoc@thn.org. We can try to walk you through it. Typically, renewal projects are this is not the time to make a change to a renewal project, but if you were directed by your field office to make a change, then we can work with you collaboratively to get that taken care of. All right, that's all the questions in the chat. I want to make space for any more verbal questions if there are any. I recognize, like, if I were you, I would be questioning quite a bit right now. In fact, I still question quite a bit from where I sit. So if you have any questions, please, you can come off of mute, put those in the chat. So there's another question in the chat here. Are there sample forms in the package for medical and mental health partnerships? The answer to that question is no, there are not sample RFPs. Highly recommend if you're planning to leverage housing or healthcare that you review that section of the RFP, because there have been some changes from the 2022 supplemental notice of funding opportunity, which is where that priority comes from. So that priority was first implemented actually a couple of years ago in the annual competition. HUD has really doubled down on the leveraging housing and healthcare resources. They did it, in a big way with the supplemental NOFO, but they've carried that forward to the 2023 annual competition with some modifications. So we incorporated some modification to the 2022 leveraging housing and healthcare into our 2023 request for proposal or solicitation. So Jenny asks, to follow up on the monitoring question, can an existing project with outstanding findings, does that prevent an expansion application as well? Jenny, it would, if the applicant's monitoring findings are still open as of August the 20th. These are great questions, y'all. I'm excited for this year. This last year, the CoC did really, really well with the annual competition. Not so well with the supplemental notice of funding opportunity, but we're excited for the 2023 annual. We think we've got a recipe that works and is what HUD wants to see. And so we're really excited to see what communities come up with. as always, if you have any specific questions, you can reach out to txboscoc@thn.org. And that mailbox is monitored by no less than 5 staff. So someone will see it immediately and will respond to you as quickly as possible. If there are no other questions at this time, oh, Michelle, okay, so Michelle's got a question. On renewal applicants, can we adjust dollar amounts within the existing budget line items? So yes, Michelle, you can make minor changes to your renewal project budget line items. Please review the NOFO before getting started on those budget changes. There are some restrictions about what sorts of things you can do and what you cannot do. You cannot, of course, increase your admin to more than 10% of the subtotal of all the other budget lines, but you can make minor adjustments less than 10% between budget line items. And I also realize that folks might just be like, this is a lot of information and you may not even understand or know what you have questions about right now. After you've had the chance to review the RFP and the materials and get in there and apply and get started, if you have questions, again, please, we are here to help to the greatest extent that we can. One of the things that we cannot do is provide an individual applicant some competitive advantage over another, but we'll tell you if what you're asking is something that we can't answer and try to point you to a resource that can. And with that, I think we're gonna wrap it up. Thank you all so much. We really appreciate the passion and the dedication that folks come to this work with. And with that, we'll see you soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, y'all.